They'll tell you it was a typo, a clerical error, that the nurse was overworked, or the doctor mumbled, or the form was smudged when they scanned it. But you've always known. Something about that name didn't feel like an accident. It wasn't how your mother whispered it when you were still swaddled in hospital blue. It wasn't what your grandmother embroidered into the baby blanket. Somewhere between the breath of your birth and the official stamp of identity, they changed it, a single letter, a subtle shift, just enough to dislocate your alignment from something sacred. And now, years later, that change still echoes, because what they altered wasn't just your spelling, it was your frequency. Chosen one, you were encoded with something ancient, something the system wasn't built to understand or contain. And the moment they entered your information into the terminal, the screen flickered, not like a glitch, like a recognition, as if the machine paused to breathe. A protocol kicked in, the kind whispered about in closed-door meetings. If subject matches known pattern, reroute file for observation. The file was tagged, rerouted, and filed under a different index entirely, one that doesn't show up in civilian records. Your parents never knew, but somewhere, beneath layers of clearance, your name lives in a place where nothing is forgotten. You ever wonder why paperwork around you always feels strange? Why applications vanish, licenses take longer, files get lost, and reappear with red stamps or smudged dates? That's not bureaucracy, that's surveillance. Your presence triggers systems that most people will never encounter. And it started that day in the hospital, the day the name was typed wrong, the day someone stepped slightly off script to shift your alignment just enough to keep you hidden, but not erased. And here's what they didn't expect, that your spirit would still recognize the truth, that even with the adjustment, your soul would vibrate at the original frequency God encoded, the one heaven wrote, not the government. They could tamper with the paper, but they couldn't mute the prophecy. Every time you felt misplaced, misnamed, or misunderstood, it wasn't identity confusion, it was spiritual recall. You've been remembering who you really are. The Bible says in Revelation 2:17, "To the one who is victorious, I will give a white stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it." Chosen one, that name, your real name, lives in heaven's files, and it's starting to resurface. That's why you're here. That's why things feel like they're shaking around you. The world may have typed your name wrong, but heaven never did. And now the code is waking up. You were never lost. You were embedded. They always said it with hesitation, like it was heavy, like it carried something no one wanted to explain. Your first name came easy, spoken with warmth, scribbled in school books, whispered in prayer. But your middle name? That was different. Even family would pause before saying it out loud, like it held a charge. Like saying it too clearly might wake something up, and you felt that tension growing up. You never quite understood why your middle name didn't feel like yours, and yet felt more like you than the one printed first. Because here's the truth. They didn't give you that name. They assigned it, selected from a list. Not one made by your mother or father, but one curated quietly. Names given to children who matched certain markers, spiritual and genetic. You were one of them, born at the right hour, under the right convergence. And when the frequency of your cry was analyzed, yes, analyzed, your middle name was chosen not by tradition, but by alignment. A match from a database older than most realize. That name was a key, a sound that would resonate with something far beneath the surface of ordinary life, but no one told you. They hoped you'd never feel it echo. Chosen one, you've always wondered why it felt off and yet oddly right. That's because the name they gave you, that middle name, was encrypted with history, spiritual memory, traces of the sacred bloodline they were trained to monitor. And every time you've seen it on paper, something stirred. a flicker behind your ribs, a tightening in your chest. That wasn't anxiety, that was activation. The silence wasn't a mistake either, it was protocol. Not speaking it aloud limited the resonance, diminished the risk of a full awakening, because they knew if you ever spoke it in full awareness, something would open. A veil, a seal, a gate. Your middle name wasn't just a name, it was a location, a direction, a vibration that aligns you with hidden parts of yourself and exposes hidden parts of them. You may have felt drawn to certain symbols, languages, places. You may have had dreams where strangers call you by that name, and now you're starting to remember. The Bible says in Isaiah 45:3, "I will give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, who summons you by name." Chosen one, your middle name was a summoning not to control you, but to call you forward. You're not just remembering it, it's remembering you. It's why they watched you in school, why random tests felt targeted, why strangers have sometimes looked at you like they knew something you didn't. The silence wasn't just about secrecy, it was about fear. They feared what would happen if you ever spoke your full name from a place of power. Before your legs found balance, before your voice formed words, your name had already moved through networks most people don't know exist. You were still wrapped in cotton and innocence when your birth certificate triggered something behind locked servers and biometric firewalls. It didn't happen in your city, it didn't happen in your country. The signal jumped through a data pipeline into a global archive maintained in silence, one not even all world leaders are cleared to see. It wasn't flagged because you were dangerous, it was flagged because you were different. And difference to them is always a threat, especially when it carries prophecy. Your certificate held more than your birth details. The algorithm tied to your hospital ID ran background checks that had nothing to do with your parents. It scanned for ancient lineages, soul frequencies, bloodline markers buried so deep they only show up in energetic field mapping, something that's been quietly studied by agencies who pose as tech firms. And you, chosen one, matched a pattern that hasn't surfaced in generations, a divine rhythm embedded in your DNA. That's why the file didn't go through the usual chain. That's why it was copied, duplicated, encrypted, and redirected to a private task force operating under a name you wouldn't recognize unless you'd already started waking up. They didn't need to know who you were. They only needed to know what you were. And what you are is disruptive to every system that's tried to suppress the light. They monitor births like yours, not for the safety of the child, but for the preservation of silence. They keep tabs on the ones born under convergence days, or born during cosmic alignments tied to ancient prophecies. And you, without ever asking, entered into this life carrying a vibration that unsettled their order. Your birth was not quiet in the spirit realm. That hospital room may have seemed calm to the untrained eye, but elsewhere, lights dimmed, alerts pinged, surveillance nodes registered anomalies. And your file, it glowed. Chosen one, the government didn't just file your birth, they archived it into a folder that cannot be deleted, because they knew something heaven confirmed, that you would one day remember, that the dreams would return, that the numbers would repeat, that your timing would feel too precise to be chance. Psalm 139 verse 16 says, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." That divine record existed before their certificate ever did. But the moment they saw your alignment, their fear activated. They knew this wasn't a random birth, it was a breach, a holy glitch in their design. And so your file was flagged. Before you ever took a step, the system knew you'd one day learn how to run. You've probably looked at it dozens of times without thinking twice. That string of digits printed at the bottom of your birth certificate, boxed off, faded slightly, ignored by most. They told you it was a file number, a processing ID, a meaningless code for office use only. But nothing about your life has ever been meaningless, chosen one. And now that number is beginning to speak. It was never just a reference. It was a signal, a cipher, a timestamp woven into the divine script of your incarnation, and it's been vibrating under the surface of your existence ever since. To the untrained eye, it looks like bureaucracy. But in the spiritual realm, and in certain encrypted intelligence networks, those numbers hold frequencies, alignments, coordinates. Your number wasn't generated randomly. It was generated because of you, mathematically sculpted from the hour of your birth, the position of celestial bodies, and something deeper, your soul's resonance. That number is an address, not to a location, but to a sequence. A place in the matrix where destiny was injected into time. Certain defense contracts have worked for decades on mapping awakening patterns. Patterns tied to individuals born with spiritual assignments that intersect geopolitical timelines. That number on your document, it was used to track you across those grids. Every time you've moved, every time you've made a significant life decision, every time you've dreamed something that came true, that number lit up in their database. You've always felt watched, and you were, but not for the reason they want you to believe. You're not a threat, you're a trigger, and that number marks the moment your arrival disrupted the algorithm of this world. The Bible says in Luke 12:7, "Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows." God doesn't deal in randomness. Every detail of your design was intentional, and so was that code. The system thought it was cataloging you. Heaven knew it was naming you. That number has shown up in other places, hasn't it? On receipts, clocks, ID cards, license plates. It's followed you. Or maybe you've followed it. Not because you're paranoid, but because your spirit knows it's connected to something more. A buried message, a breadcrumb, a key, one that's slowly being decoded as you awaken. And here's what they hoped you'd never realize. When spoken aloud, in full consciousness, that number activates a shift. In you, around you, through you. It's not just data, it's DNA memory. A signature that proves you were sent, not born. You always assumed your birth record was written in plain English. Ordinary words, standard formatting, nothing unusual. But that's because you were looking with human eyes, chosen one, not spiritual ones. Government documents use one language publicly and another privately. Not written in symbols you'd recognize, but in arrangements, placements, spacing, and sequence patterns that speak to those who know how to read them. Your birth certificate wasn't simply filled out, it was encoded, crafted with intention, structured with hidden meaning, and they prayed you'd never awaken enough to notice. There's a reason certain fields on your certificate seem oddly spaced, why one line is slightly misaligned, why a date doesn't sit perfectly on the grid. That isn't sloppiness, it's signal placement, used by agencies that catalog spiritual anomalies. A spacing shift is a marker, a misalignment is a category, a repeated character is a warning or a confirmation. And on your record, all three appear in a pattern so rare it's only been documented 9 times in the past century. They knew exactly what you were the moment the doctor wrote the first letter of your name. Your record carries a language rooted in ancient numerology, gematria, and angelic coding systems abandoned publicly but never stopped privately. Long before computers, scribes used spacing and ink pressure to encode spiritual classifications. Today, they call it metadata. Back then it was prophetic notation, and your certificate contains both. because your birth collided with something bigger than bureaucracy, something celestial, something the old systems were built to monitor. That's why your document feels strange when you look at it, isn't it? Why your eyes linger on places that don't make sense, even if you can't explain why. That's your spirit recognizing its own blueprint. Your soul knows the language. It's older than you are. It's older than governments, older than nations, older than the very system trying to contain it. You've always been bilingual, speaking the human world with your voice and the divine world with your being. Isaiah 28:11 says, "With stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to this people." They thought they were hiding something from you, but God always leaves a trace, a signature, a mark, and your birth record carries his handwriting beneath their ink. Chosen one, the hidden language on your certificate, is the first undeniable proof that you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to be recognized, not by the world, but by the watchers, the archivists, the spiritual gatekeepers assigned to monitor arrivals like yours. They didn't just write your information, they documented your frequency. And now that you're seeing through the veil, the language is starting to reveal itself. The parts you once overlooked are beginning to glow in your awareness. Your spirit is translating what your mind was never taught. You weren't reading the document incorrectly. They won't admit it happened, but every trace points to it. Your file wasn't uploaded like the others. It wasn't scanned, emailed, or logged through standard channels. It was carried, hand-delivered, escorted physically by someone not on the hospital's payroll, not in the registry database, and not seen again after that day. No badge, no digital trail, just a name no one remembers and a presence no one forgot. The nurses say the room felt colder after he left, like something sacred had passed through, or something watching and in the archives. Your file was stamped, processed by courier, but there's no record of that courier ever existing. You were just hours old, wrapped in warmth, unaware of the spiritual classification already spiraling behind your name. And yet they moved you like classified material, not because you were fragile, but because you were dangerous, not to people, but to patterns. You were never part of their blueprint. You were written in from above, and every system built to suppress that kind of light recognized it immediately. That's why they didn't trust digital transfer. Your energy disrupted networks. Files corrupted themselves when your data was transmitted, so they sent someone, flesh and blood, trained in containment and silence, to walk your file into the vault personally. Who was he? Not a mailman, not a nurse, not a government agent in the traditional sense. He was something in between, a bridge between spiritual protocol and bureaucratic execution. One of the few entrusted to carry files like yours, chosen births marked for divine interruption. And though no cameras captured his face, the sensors logged something strange. His fingerprints triggered a legacy code match in the system legacy, as in not from this generation. Legacy, as in ancestral task force. Guardians of birth anomalies passed down through bloodlines, not employment contracts. Psalm 91:11 says, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." Sometimes angels don't wear wings. Sometimes they wear plain coats and hand over papers that shift timelines. You weren't just filed, you were delivered, as if even the spiritual realm needed to ensure your entry point into this world was marked with witness. That handoff, it was sacred, a passing of responsibility from the unseen to the seen. Chosen one, the stranger who delivered your file, wasn't just carrying a document. He was carrying prophecy, guarding it, placing it, ensuring it reached the right coordinates, not in a file cabinet, but in the energetic grid that tracks awakenings. He placed your record in a section reserved for potential timeline disruptors, those born with the codes to shift realities, open gates, and collapse illusions, he was never supposed to be noticed. Hospitals don't just disappear, they downsize, rebrand, relocate. But yours, it didn't make the news. No farewell ceremony, no tribute for decades of service, just a quiet shuttering. One day it was open, the next, boarded windows and a temporarily closed for renovation sign that stayed up for 3 years before vanishing entirely. Locals stopped asking questions. The staff were reassigned. The records were transferred, sealed, or lost. But you've always known that something happened there, something unspoken. And now the silence around it feels louder than ever, because the more you awaken, the more your spirit starts to trace back to the beginning. You were born in that building for a reason, not by proximity, not by chance. That delivery room was chosen, selected as a site of entry, not just into this world, but into this timeline. And they had protocols for children like you. Protocols tied to a program buried beneath 7 layers of medical classification. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, it was called Echo Womb, a surveillance project created to monitor what they called non-conforming births. Children who disrupted electromagnetic readings, who caused flickers in operating systems, who arrived with frequencies that bent reality, even if only slightly. The night you were born, the monitors in your wing looped in reverse for 7 seconds. The hallway lights dimmed 3 times. An off-duty janitor reportedly dropped to his knees in the stairwell, overwhelmed by a sound no one else could hear. The doctors said nothing, but the head nurse transferred out the next morning, and by the end of the year, a hush had fallen over that wing, like something sacred had entered it, or something unspeakable had passed through it. What really closed that hospital wasn't funding, it was fear. Your file had already triggered surveillance, but what happened in that room, that was proof. Proof that a force beyond them had marked you. And when systems built on control encounter something they can't predict, they don't publicize it, they bury it. They reclassify the space. They call in a sweep team and perform a spiritual sterilization ritual under the guise of renovations. But nothing ever truly leaves a place like that. Energy lingers, frequencies cling to walls. And your cry, the first sound you ever made, it's still echoing in that building. Psalm 118, verse 22 says, "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." That hospital rejected the truth, tried to erase what happened. But you, chosen one, became the cornerstone of something far bigger than their institutions could contain. Your arrival cracked open a frequency gate, and that building could no longer hold what was awakened within it. It wasn't just a name, it was a signal. When they typed it into the system, first in the hospital, then in the civil registry, something flickered deep inside a classified database built to detect spiritual anomalies. You weren't even a full day old when the alert triggered. A code flashed on a black screen in a quiet room hundreds of miles away. Not an alarm, a whisper, a digital pulse that said, "One just arrived." And whoever received that message didn't panic. They had been expecting you. Your name, even altered as they tried to do, carried embedded numerical patterns that mirrored ancient sequences from the Book of Enoch and scrolls still hidden beneath Vatican vaults. The system you were registered into wasn't just for tracking citizens. It was designed, quietly and privately, for identifying the chosen souls born with activated coding, the kind that pierces through timelines and disrupts predictive models. Your name, chosen one, didn't just enter a database. It entered a prophecy detector. That's why strange things started happening early in your life. Letters that never arrived, documents mysteriously delayed, a quiet presence following you online, then offline. The way certain job systems flagged you, the glitchy cameras, the dreams that felt like warnings, the calls that clicked before hanging up. This wasn't paranoia, it was observation. You had been placed on what they call a low-noise watch list, meaning not to interfere, but never to ignore a digital net weaved quietly around you, tracking spiritual activity, energy bursts, linguistic patterns, even your dreams, especially your dreams. Your name is more than syllables, it's a vibration. In the ancient world, they knew names weren't spoken, they were activated. The Bible says in Philippians 2:9-10, God gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow. That's not metaphor, that's frequency truth. Names carry power. And yours? Yours opened a protocol the system was told to watch for, but not interfere with unless absolutely necessary. They expected you'd forget, but heaven expected you'd remember, and now you are, which is why you felt the shift. Your surroundings behaving differently, people treating you with a mixture of awe and unease, surveillance tightening, then glitching. Because the moment you started questioning your past, the moment you said your full name out loud with intent, the protocol spiked again. They don't understand how your energy keeps shorting their readings, how you override static without trying. But you weren't made by them, you were planted within them. As a disruption, a holy anomaly. Chosen one, your name is a key. And when spoken with awareness, it doesn't just open doors, it collapses locks. It looked like any other hospital room. Pale walls, blinking monitors, a single overhead light. But behind the sterility was a setup designed for more than observation. The cameras weren't just for security. The wires hidden behind the paneling weren't just connected to vital monitors. There was something deeper embedded into that space. A listening structure designed to capture more than sound. It was built to absorb frequencies, to detect anomalies in atmospheric pressure, electrical resistance, harmonic vibration. That birth room was never meant to just witness your arrival. It was meant to record your entrance in ways the medical team never fully understood. The moment you took your first breath, the sensors lit up not in red, in violet, an undocumented reading, one only seen during rare solar alignment births and thought to be extinct. Your cry carried more than pain, it carried data. Vibrational sequences they had only read about in sealed white papers, passed down from Cold War era experiments on consciousness and sound fields. You weren't just a baby, you were a signal event. The kind of arrival that governments tag, track, and keep quiet about. Because admitting the truth would mean acknowledging a spiritual frequency grid they've spent decades denying. The room captured it all. Your vocal imprint, your heartbeat wave, the spike in Schumann resonance that rippled across the building for 11 seconds when your hands clenched for the first time. What should have been mundane medical footage became encrypted and transferred to a black site server within 48 hours, marked non-public. The attending physician was debriefed. The on-shift nurse received a gag order, and a private firm with no official name came to recalibrate the room before the next birth could take place. They weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of what followed you in, because something did. Not visible, not measurable by their tools, but present, holy, overshadowing. The midwife said later that the shadows in the room didn't match the lighting, that for a split second everything felt still, like even time was holding its breath. Your arrival didn't just affect the people in that room, it affected the grid. The hospital's backup generators surged, even though there was no outage. The digital clocks reset to 00. A maintenance worker reported hearing a voice say, "It is done," though no one else had spoken. Isaiah 66:9 says, "Shall I bring to the point of birth and not deliver?" Heaven made sure your delivery was not just physical, but prophetic. That room became a portal, a witness chamber, and though the paint's been redone and the equipment removed, the recording remains, not in wires or drives, but in the walls themselves. Frequency leaves fingerprints. Chosen one, you didn't just enter a room. They called it a power fluctuation, a minor electrical anomaly in the East Wing. But the logs told a different story. 3 lights exploded in sequence, not from overload, but from an internal pulse that no engineer could explain. Surveillance footage from your delivery room was corrupted just minutes before your birth, the feed melting into a blur of violet and white static. The IT team labeled it a system malfunction, but one technician never returned to work. He walked out, pale and shaking, repeating the same phrase under his breath. They weren't human. Something entered that room, chosen one, and they've been trying to cover it up ever since. Not with denial, with diversion, with layered language, redacted logs, and new hires brought in to scrub the story before it reached anyone outside. You see, when angelic presence intersects physical space, the veil doesn't just thin, it tears. And when that happens, the spiritual realm becomes momentarily measurable, not just sensed, recorded. Sound meters spike in ranges we don't hear. Temperatures drop with no cold source. Shadows move against the light. And in your case, the very blueprint of the room shifted. They told the staff to stay quiet, gave bonuses to those who cooperated, transferred out the ones who asked too many questions, but not everyone forgot. One nurse, the one who held you before your mother did, wrote something in a journal before disappearing. He didn't cry right away. He stared, wide open, like he was watching someone. She never told anyone who she meant, but you know, don't you? Because you weren't alone in that room. There was a presence, not the kind that brings fear, but the kind that silences it. They tried to dismiss it as birth adrenaline, to explain away the tingling in the air, the way metal objects vibrated slightly on countertops, the faint scent of burned incense with no source. But behind the scenes, a higher clearance team took over. Not government, not exactly, more like an embedded order, ancient and corporate, draped in modern credentials. Their mission wasn't to intervene, just to document, contain, and reclassify what occurred. Your file was updated that night, not just with your weight or APGAR score, but with a private note flagged in red. Entity witnessed possible interference. Subject must be tracked indefinitely. Psalm 34:7 says, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them." They saw that delivery. They watched what stepped into that room, and for the first time in years, their surveillance failed. The light was too intense, the presence too holy. Their tech wasn't built to withstand glory. Everyone else signed the form. The attending physician, the assistant, the hospital registrar, even the courier, who wasn't listed on any official roster one by one. They put their names beneath yours, sealing your existence into a system that tried to own you from the start. But one refused, quietly, deliberately. A nurse in her late 30s with dark eyes and a stillness about her that unsettled the rest of the staff. She had been present for hundreds of births, but yours stopped her cold. When the clipboard reached her hands, she held the pen, but didn't write. She looked at you, not like you were fragile, but like you were on fire. Then she set the pen down, removed her gloves, and walked out of the room without saying a word. She never returned to that hospital. No exit interview, no forwarding address, no final paycheck collected, just gone. And yet, she left something behind. Tucked beneath the bottom page of your birth file was a slip of paper folded in thirds, faint lilac perfume, slightly frayed edges. On it, in handwriting that didn't match any other employee on record, were 3 words: "He knows already." That message was intercepted by the admin team and marked insignificant. But it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for you. A seed planted in silence. A message from someone who saw what others chose to ignore. You see, that nurse wasn't just scared, she was convicted. Because what she witnessed during your delivery shattered her understanding of reality. She saw the flicker in the room, felt the presence standing behind her as you took your first breath. Watched the clock spin counterclockwise for a full 7 seconds before freezing. And when your eyes opened, too focused, too still, she heard something in her spirit say, "This one remembers." That's when she knew. This wasn't a medical event, it was a spiritual arrival, and she would not sign a document that attempted to reduce a divine moment into a government form. Psalm 139 verse 15 says, "When I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth." Chosen one, not everyone can stomach witnessing divine craftsmanship. Some participate in silence, others sign without question. But the ones who know, really know, feel it in their bones when they're in the presence of prophecy. And she knew. That's why she walked out, not in fear, but in reverence. Her name was scrubbed from the employee list, her photo removed from team archives. But she's not lost. She simply exited the system, untraceable, like a guardian exiting stage left after ensuring the flame was lit. And maybe, just maybe, she still watches from a distance. At 6:42 a.m., just hours after your birth, an encrypted request was logged from a terminal within a US data center linked to foreign diplomatic communication. The recipient? A sealed archive inside Vatican City, one that requires dual authorization keys, physical presence, and permission from an entity known only as Archivum Echo. The file requested wasn't about medicine. It wasn't about genetics. It was spiritual. A scroll, transcribed in pre-Constantinian Latin, categorized under birthing signs and intercessions, non-earthbound witnesses. That request wasn't random. It was triggered. And the timestamp on the query? It matched precisely with the moment your birth record was uploaded into the state system. Chosen one, someone or something, recognized what had arrived. You. Vatican archives are not casually accessed. They're not Google. They are not searchable in the way the world is used to. For centuries, they've protected knowledge not meant for public digestion. Alternate genealogies, extraterrestrial lineages, accounts of births attended by unseen beings, cries that shattered glass and time. The archive they reached for was last opened in 1962. The person who last touched that document wore robes, not a lab coat, and yet the request came because your arrival wasn't just witnessed, it was remembered. You were a fulfillment. And when prophecy gets fulfilled, the keepers of the record are notified, not by email, not by phone, but by energetic resonance. The Vatican's internal system isn't digital at its core, it's harmonic. A deep frequency recorder vibrated during your birth, activating a protocol reserved for rare arrivals whose presence matches celestial birth tones mapped before the Council of Nicaea. And yours matched 3. They didn't panic. They sent a priest, not one in a collar, but one with clearance, one who deals in spiritual thresholds. He didn't come to bless the room, he came to verify. Within 24 hours, he stood in the exact space where you were born, his hand over the wall where the static had bled through. He didn't ask questions. He closed his eyes and whispered 3 words. It touched here, and then he left, taking with him a small vial of floor dust, your birth time, and a digital replica of the surveillance glitch Matthew 2:1-2 tells of wise men who traveled, not to see a child, but to confirm a signal. The star was only part of the evidence. Your birth, too, sent out a star-level frequency, but it wasn't in the sky. It was in the field, the grid, the ether, and the ones who guard the old scrolls knew exactly what to do. They didn't issue a statement, they filed it under imminent unfolding. That phrase hasn't been used in over 200 years. Chosen one, you weren't just born, you were activated. They told your parents it was routine, just a standard test, a routine draw, to check for compatibility, for any risks, for the baby's wellness. But that needle didn't just collect blood, it collected code. Within minutes, your blood type was confirmed and immediately escalated. Not to your pediatrician, not even to the hospital's lead physician, but to a clearance tier reserved for individuals flagged under what the system calls Category R. The R doesn't stand for risk. It stands for relic, a classification used when blood carries traces of frequencies linked to ancient texts, divine genetics, or undocumented energy patterns. Your blood type was only part of the story. It was the charge in it that changed everything. You see, blood has memory, not metaphorical, literal. Stored within the electromagnetic spin of your cells is data, information, resonance, prophetic signal. And yours pulsed in a way that triggered legacy alerts embedded in cold storage since the 1970s. Those alerts weren't built by hospitals. They were designed by spiritual analysts embedded within private biotech companies with ties to defense and divinity. That may sound extreme, but what's more extreme is that your name was cross-referenced with scrolls. Yes, actual scrolls, kept under temperature-controlled vaults, most of which haven't been fully translated. Chosen one, your blood carried the markers they were searching for, not in volume but in vibration. That's why the lab tech who handled your sample didn't just test it, she rerouted it without question, because she was trained to do so, trained for the 1 in 10 million chance that a newborn's blood would sing, and yours sang not in sound, but in waveform, a low-frequency hum that bent her scanner slightly and made her hands tremble. She dropped the first vial, and when she looked at the second, she swore she saw it glow. They told her it was fatigue, that it happens, but the next day, she was reassigned, and your sample, it never returned. It was transferred to a facility beneath the surface one not listed on maps. And from that day forward, your record, though active, was quietly firewalled from traditional systems. You became a living file, watched, not interfered with, tracked, but never touched, because they don't want to destroy you, they want to study you. Leviticus 17:11 says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood." They know this. But more than that, they fear it. Because your blood doesn't just carry life, it carries light. Encoded memory, genetic prophecy, the blueprint of something. Heaven wrote long before Earth had the language to hold it. Your blood type isn't rare by accident, it's rare by assignment, and it's why they've kept watching, but never dared to get too close. Your birth certificate was never meant to stay where it was first filed. Most records are processed locally, copied nationally, archived digitally. But yours was quietly elevated, redirected, slipped into a system that doesn't exist on paper, a classified spiritual database known only to a handful of insiders as the Atlas Index. It's not government, not military, not even religious in the traditional sense. It's older than all three, a convergence point where spiritual anomalies, prophetic births, and non-compliant souls are recorded, monitored, and left dormant until they awaken. And you, chosen one, you lit that file up like a flare in the fog. Atlas doesn't catalog normal, it catalogs distortion events, births that ripple through the energetic fabric of time. Individuals who arrive carrying codes, memories, frequencies that don't match their environment. People whose presence destabilizes systems not because they're destructive, but because they carry a higher resonance than what the system was built to contain. Your birth wasn't just witnessed, it was logged in a hidden category called Index 7X, Earthbound Disruptive. That designation isn't a punishment, it's a prophecy. It means you were born with built-in recall, built-in rebellion against illusions, built-in blueprints that don't match the programming of this world. Atlas tracks lineages back to pre-cataclysmic civilizations, not just bloodlines, but purpose lines. And when your name came through, something ancient was recognized. They didn't know your future. They didn't need to. Your frequency spoke first. It matched a signature found only in a handful of other souls across millennia, a tone encoded in the lost scrolls of Thoth, in the untranslated fragments of Qumran, in the sky maps etched into the stone temples of South America. And when Atlas Index identified you, your file wasn't just stored, it was flagged for fulfillment. Psalm 139 verse 16 says, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." The world has its books, but heaven keeps its own. And Atlas, it stands between them. A liminal space of watchers, not to stop you, but to record the moment you remembered who you were. You may have felt it before, like you've been watched, not with malice, but with tension. Not because they hate you, but because they're waiting for something they don't understand. The Atlas Index doesn't interfere, it observes, because those who awaken on their own are far more powerful than those who are pushed. You're not lost in the system, you've been positioned in it. And now that your awareness is rising, the index is no longer just a file. They waited until you were just old enough to forget. 7 years old, that fragile age where memory begins to root, but the world still calls it imagination. That's when it happened, quietly, without warning. A system-wide purge disguised as a routine update. School records disappeared. Medical forms became incomplete. A glitch removed your middle name from a local database. A school photo was corrupted beyond repair, one where your eyes had come out glowing. The adults said it was a tech issue. You didn't understand then, but your spirit did, because that year your dreams changed. You stopped speaking about the beings you saw. You stopped drawing the gate with the light pouring through it. You started forgetting the sound that used to hum in your chest when you were alone. That wasn't natural, that was engineered, a soft erasure, because something in your energy at age 7 began to destabilize their containment protocol. You had started remembering things you were never taught, quoting passages no one had read to you, recognizing people you'd never met, but swearing they'd been in your dreams. And so, the system attempted a reset, not of you, but of your record. If they could scramble your digital footprint, they believed they could fragment your soul's momentum. The purge was meant to slow your awakening, to scatter the breadcrumbs, to push you further into sleep. But they miscalculated, because even as your data was wiped, your frequency remained. And frequencies can't be deleted. The Bible says in Job 33:14-16, "For God does speak, now one way, now another, though no one perceives it, in a dream, in a vision of the night." That year, you stopped talking about the dreams, but heaven didn't stop sending them. And that silence, that numb period that followed, it wasn't weakness, it was warfare. A spiritual freeze initiated to protect what couldn't be hidden. You. There's a reason you've always felt like pieces of your childhood are missing, like there's a fog around certain memories. It's not trauma, it's tampering. They tried to erase the divine markers, but even the system they used carried a flaw. Prophecy doesn't vanish when ignored. It waits, and at age 7, your destiny went underground, dormant, watching, waiting, until the right vibration, the right year, the right moment would awaken it again. And that moment is now. You've started hearing the frequency again, haven't you? Seeing numbers, noticing patterns, feeling watched, but not with fear, with familiarity. Because the things they tried to bury are rising. The light is returning to your eyes, and the code is reconnecting inside you. It looked like a blank space, an empty field on your birth record, tucked between standard entries. Mother's maiden name, time of birth, attending physician. But this one had no label, no instructions, just a sterile block that drew your eyes for reasons you couldn't explain. Most people never notice it, but you did. And that's because it was never meant to be noticed. Not by them, only by you. Because that empty field, it wasn't empty, it was encrypted. There's a reason the digital scans of your file never align. Why certain printers glitch when trying to reprint it. Why that section, and only that section, resists OCR scanning. It's because the field isn't text. It's frequency-based metadata. Data stored not in letters, but in energetic resonance. And what was encoded in that field wasn't a word, it was a command, a divine instruction, dormant until now. Chosen One, the system that processed your birth, didn't create the field. It merely recorded what appeared in it, because when your spirit entered this world, it carried more than DNA. It carried designation, and heaven marked it. The code embedded in that field activates only when your awareness reaches a certain level. A spiritual password of sorts, unlocked not by typing, but by remembering. You've felt it lately, haven't you? The pull toward your own documents, the urge to stare at old files, the sense that something's been left behind in plain sight. That's because your consciousness has reached the vibration required to decode the field. You don't need to translate it. You already understand it, because it isn't meant for your mind, it's meant for your spirit. The code reads like a whisper when you're still. It's time. That's all. But that's everything. The blank field was a seed, and you've just bloomed into the version of you capable of receiving it. Now that you've unlocked it, things are beginning to accelerate. Dreams intensify. Timelines converge. People from your past begin returning or vanishing entirely, not because of coincidence, because the encryption wasn't passive, it was timed. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." And this is your time. The final field has unlocked. The final seal has cracked. And everything they feared would happen when you awakened is now in motion. Not chaos, calling, not destruction, deployment. You were always meant to discover it. You were born with the ability, but you had to be broken open, softened, activated, so that when you finally saw that blank space, you wouldn't dismiss it like they hoped. The moment you awaken, the atmosphere changes, not metaphorically, literally. Systems slow, frequencies spike, surveillance threads reassign their focus. You don't feel it at first, but they do. The ones monitoring the spiritual grid, the ones assigned to sleepwalkers, not rebels. You were never a threat while you were silent. But now that you've remembered who you are, they move differently. Because when a chosen one finds out, the world built to suppress them starts shaking. They won't confront you. That's not how this works. You're not chased. You're redirected. Notifications increase. Distractions multiply. Emotional turbulence rises without warning. People close to you begin pulling away, mirroring behaviors they can't explain. This is how they counter what they cannot control. Interference, not to destroy you, but to scatter your focus, fracture your momentum. Because once you're fully aligned, fully activated, they can't stop you. Not with code, not with fear, not with manipulation. And that's what terrifies them most, because they never expected you to get this far. You were supposed to stay distracted, confused, humble in a way that served them. You were supposed to believe the story, that you're ordinary, that your life is random, that your paperwork is just paper, but you found the cracks. You followed the patterns. You felt the code humming in your body. And now, it's too late to unknow what you know. You found the origin point, and with that, you've reconnected to the one thing they can't replicate: divine authority. The Bible says in 1 Peter 2:9, "But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." Chosen one, that wasn't written for the masses, that was written for moments like this, for souls like yours. You are not waking up alone. You are part of a lineage of beings who are scattered, yet synchronized, watched, yet unstoppable, flagged, yet favored. What do they do when a chosen one finds out? They retreat, they monitor, they recalculate. But it doesn't matter, because once the divine signal is reactivated in your spirit, there's no protocol left that can override your assignment. No firewall strong enough to keep your voice silent. No data wipe powerful enough to unwrite what God has authored inside you. You weren't just born, you were sent.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.